The second shape that I'd like to discuss with you is our ET. This is a prime example of an ET case. So to me, it looks like ET. If you have a little eye here and an eye here and a little grin right here, this looks like an ET. And so what happens with these cases is if the platform of the implant, let me get it in focus here for you. If the platform of the implant is not deep enough, you have a very steep out to the side, a very steep emergence profile. In this particular case, it was constrained by the type of abutment that was chosen. So this abutment is taking up about 2.5, 3 millimeters of the emergence profile. So if this had been a solution where the abutment was started here and you could have come out, it's quite possible that all of this area right here could have been restorative material, and then you might have had a heart-shaped. Can you imagine how you could comb around this if we just freeze frame this right here, and then we just draw a heart around that, starting from here at this margin of the platform and coming around, we can come around, we can draw a little heart on there. We can say, hey, this very easily could have been a heart-shaped solution, but it's not, it's an ET. And when you get ETs, there's a couple of things that happen. Number one, there's very, very difficult for the patient to keep food from getting underneath here. Okay, so this is sitting right on the gum tissue up against maybe a natural tooth, and when you have this kind of distance on this cantilever here, you have a food trap, and the patients usually complain, wow, I really get a lot of food caught in there. And then they'll tell you if they do floss, they'll say, when I floss there, it's really weird because I go down and then it goes way over, and it kind of freaks them out a little bit. You do have to warn them about that if you have one of these kind of solutions. The other thing is that the implanted tooth distance, the ITD, which is measured from the platform here to the adjacent tooth, the further this distance is, so from here to the adjacent tooth, which would be directly underneath this margin here, that distance, when that gets big, the risks of cavities, carious lesions on the adjacent tooth go up tremendously. So we want to make sure that we don't have that. Why? How can we reduce that? Well, if we come out and we fill this in, that distance is less, there's less food trap, and there's less likely that we're going to have contaminants up against a natural tooth that could cause problems. So this is an ET. It's not something you want to see. There's one more aspect to the ET. When you have this angle that shoots out straight like that, if you apply forces to the margins here, either actually to the center or to the mesial or distal margins of this solution, what you'll find is that by having a steep angle being defined as coming up and then going straight out to the side, that would be a steep angle. If we have a steep angle right here, the stresses are nearly 7 times higher. In this region right here, stresses are 7 times higher than they would be if this was filleted in and you had a heart-shaped solution. So when you see solutions that look like ETs, you also want to be very careful about working with these because they can really lead to a potential problem. If this had not failed, if this implant hadn't avulsed out of the mouth with the prostheses, if we simply knew with this implant in place that we didn't want a Snoopy, we would have chosen a different abutment, you see. We would have chosen an abutment that was lower or a custom abutment that allowed us to come out and fill this area in on either side, right here, fill that area in right there, fill that area in right there with restorative material, or if you were doing cement retained, just fill it in with a custom abutment, keeping your margin of your custom abutment within 1 millimeter of the sulcus so you don't have any issues cleaning it when you do your cementation. And you would probably have a solution that would last a very, very long time. Now, we talk about implant failures, and when we do that, they're multifactorial. As you guys know, we talk a lot about implant failures are oftentimes multifactorial. One of the problems that we have is that a lot of the solutions that we pick are driven anatomically. So for instance, this implant is a rather small implant for this size crown, okay? So you say, why? Well, one of 2 reasons. Either the doctor didn't have any bone to work with and they went with a small implant to get it in, or 2, they just simply don't know any better and they had plenty of bone and they just put a small implant in this location. Either way, this implant being fairly small underneath a molar position like this is a danger. It's a risk factor. It's too much load for this small implant, and you can run into mechanical complications. And if those mechanical complications turn into biological complications, you have a implant that makes for a very nice story here on the table, right? And we don't want that in our practice. you can see from this access hole that the clinician got the implant in the buccal lingual dimension really nicely, but was a little bit off in terms of the mesodistal. So we'd like to see this access hole a little bit more into the middle here, and maybe just a touch more towards this side right here. If we did that a little forward and a little back, and that access hole was in the center, and then we went with a little bit bigger implant, and we had the proper emergence profile, you'd likely hold this solution for a very, very long time. If you want to learn a little bit more about another shape called a Snoopy that can have bad outcomes or high mechanical risks, then check out our video right here. Smile Engineer, making implants easy.